The text from my mother came through at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, shattering the peace I had built over 18 months of silence. 3 words glowed on my screen. Serafina needs you. I was standing in my corner office on the 42nd floor, wearing a suit that cost more than my old monthly rent, about to sign off on a deal worth millions, when those words dragged me back to the last time my sister needed me, back to that bathroom where my father handed me electric clippers and forced me to shave my own head while my mother took pictures and Serafina laughed. All because my healthy hair was an insult to her cancer treatment. I had walked away from them that night, thinking I was finally free, built a new life from nothing, became a partner at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. But as I stared at those 3 words, my hands trembling against the cold glass window, I realized they had never really let me go. They were just waiting for the right moment to pull me back in. But before I tell you what I did next, if you're watching this story unfold and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you know someone who's fighting to find their worth, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and I want to hear your stories in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, to the night that broke me before it remade me. It started on a Tuesday evening, 18 months ago. The autumn air had turned crisp, and I remember the exact feeling of my key turning in the lock of my parents' front door, the way the hallway smelled like the lavender air freshener my mother obsessively sprayed everywhere. I had just gotten home from work, my laptop bag cutting into my shoulder, exhausted from a long day at the office where I had spent 9 hours building financial models that my team would present as their own work the next morning. I was a mid-level analyst then. Nothing special. Just trying to keep my head above water in a company where everyone seemed to know the secret handshakes I had never been taught. I lived with my parents and my younger sister Serafina in their sprawling house in the suburbs, a 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage that projected success to everyone who drove past. Well, I say I lived there, but really, I just existed there. A shadow moving through rooms that never quite felt like home. My bedroom was the smallest one. The one that used to be the home office before they decided having a 3rd bedroom for guests was more important than my privacy. I didn't complain. Complaining in my family was like trying to argue with a brick wall. Except the wall would somehow make you feel guilty for bothering it. Serafina had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 6 months earlier. I know how that sounds. Cancer is devastating, and I'm not heartless. I cried when we found out. I sat in that sterile hospital room with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and held my little sister's hand through the first round of chemo. I watched her beautiful long hair, the hair my mother had always called her crowning glory, start to thin and fall out in clumps. I bought her soft blankets in her favorite color, made her homemade chicken soup when she couldn't keep anything down, sat with her through the long nights when she was too scared to sleep. But somewhere along the way, her illness became a weapon, and I became the target. It happened gradually, so slowly I didn't see it coming. First, it was small requests. Could I pick up her medication? Could I drive her to her appointment because mom was too upset? Could I handle the insurance paperwork because dad was too busy with work? Each request made sense on its own. Each one seemed reasonable, but they stacked up like bricks, building a wall that would eventually trap me. My parents stopped asking how I was doing, stopped noticing when I came home, stopped seeing me at all. Really? Every conversation started and ended with Serafina. Her counts, her treatment schedule, her emotional state, her needs. I became invisible. Or worse, I became visible only as a tool, a means to an end. Someone whose sole purpose was to make things easier for the person who really mattered. That Tuesday, I had an important presentation scheduled for the next morning. It was my chance to finally prove myself to Marcus, my supervisor, a sharp woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through all the corporate nonsense straight to what actually mattered. She actually seemed to see potential in me that no one else bothered to look for, and she had spent the last 3 months giving me opportunities that everyone said were above my pay grade. This presentation was about a merger analysis I had conducted entirely on my own. 70 slides of research and financial projections that could shift the direction of a multi-million-dollar decision. I had spent weeks preparing, staying at the office until midnight, rehearsing in my car, memorizing every data point, I knew this could change my trajectory at the firm. I knew this was the kind of moment that could define the next 5 years of my career. I had gotten my hair trimmed that weekend for the first time in months, spent money I couldn't really afford on a good haircut that made me feel professional and put together. I had bought a new blazer. I had practiced my presentation voice until my throat hurt. I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, touching up my hair with a bit of styling cream, when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps. Deliberate. I turned to find my father standing in the doorway, his 6-foot frame blocking any escape, his face carved from ice. He was still wearing his work clothes, a button-down shirt and slacks, his tie loosened but not removed. Behind him, my mother wore that particular smile she always had when she was about to enjoy something cruel. The corners of her mouth turned up just slightly, her eyes bright with anticipation. She was holding her phone, like she might want to record whatever was about to happen. Serafina lounged against the hallway wall just beyond them, scrolling through her phone with studied indifference. Her bald head covered with a silk scarf that probably cost more than my entire month's salary. "Cut it," my father said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was telling me to take out the trash or turn off a light I had left on. He blinked, not understanding. My hand was still in my hair, frozen mid-motion. "Cut what?" "Your hair." He stepped into the bathroom, and suddenly the small space felt suffocating, airless. I could smell his cologne, that expensive woody scent he had worn for as long as I could remember, and it made my stomach turn. "She's fighting death, and you don't get to look better than her." The words hit me like a physical blow, like he had reached out and punched me in the chest. I looked past him to my mother, searching for some sign that this was a joke, some terrible misunderstanding, some awful prank that would end with someone laughing and saying they got me good. But Mom just smiled wider, that terrible satisfied smile. "You think anyone at that sad little office cares what you look like," she said, her voice dripping with contempt, each word carefully chosen to cut the deepest ace. "You're just a number pusher in a cubicle." Serafina needs comfort. She needs to know she's not alone in this. You don't get to have hair while she's suffering. It's karmic balance. It's only fair. I opened my mouth to protest, to explain about the presentation, about how much this mattered to me, about how I had been planning this for months. But Serafina cut me off without even looking up from her phone. "Just do it already," she said, her tone bored, like I was keeping her from something important. "You look like you're trying to make yourself the victim here. God, you're so dramatic." My father reached past me and grabbed the electric clippers from the drawer under the sink. I hadn't even known we had them. Later, I would realize he must have bought them specifically for this moment, must have planned this, and that knowledge would hurt even more than what happened next. He switched them on, and the buzzing filled the small bathroom like a swarm of angry bees, loud and mechanical, and absolutely terrifying in its finality. Then he pressed them into my hand, his grip tight enough to hurt, his fingers digging into my wrist until I thought he might leave bruises. "Do it yourself," he said, his face inches from mine. "So you remember that this is your choice. Your sacrifice for your sister, your contribution to this family." But it wasn't a choice, and we all knew it. We all stood there in that tiny bathroom with the buzzing clippers between us, and we all understood exactly what was happening. This was about power. This was about control. This was about making sure I knew my place. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the clippers, the vibration traveling up my arm. "Please," I whispered, and I hated how small my voice sounded. How weak, how desperate. "I have a meeting tomorrow. It's the most important presentation of my career. Can we just wait a few days, please? I'm begging you." My mother laughed. Actually laughed. A sound like breaking glass. Sharp and cutting and completely devoid of any warmth. "Important. You're a nobody in a nothing job making barely enough to cover your own expenses. Serafina is dying. Your meeting doesn't matter. Your hair doesn't matter. You don't matter. When are you going to understand that?" The clippers felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, and I barely recognized the person I saw there. Trapped. Defeated. About to participate in my own destruction. I raised them to my head with tears streaming down my face, hot and fast and unstoppable. The first pass cut a brutal stripe through my hair, right down the center of my scalp, and I watched it fall to the white tile floor in dark clumps. Each pass of the clippers felt like I was cutting away pieces of myself. Pieces I would never get back. Serafina giggled, and the sound was worse than anything else that had happened. Oh my God. You look like a boiled egg. Someone peeled wrong. Mom, are you seeing this? She looks insane. I kept going, because what else could I do? My father stood behind me, watching in the mirror, making sure I didn't stop or slow down. My mother had her phone out now, and I could see her taking photos, actually documenting this moment like it was something to remember fondly. I was trapped in that bathroom with 3 people who were supposed to love me, watching me humiliate myself, and they were enjoying it. They were getting pleasure from my pain. Midway through, my hands were shaking so badly that the clippers caught on a snag, and I jerked them awkwardly, trying to free them. The sharp edge bit into the top of my ear, and I felt a hot trickle of blood slide down my neck, staining the collar of my shirt. The pain was sharp and immediate, and I gasped. No one moved to help me. My father didn't reach for a tissue or a bandage. My mother didn't ask if I was okay. They just watched. My mother's smile just grew more satisfied, like the blood was proof of something she had always known about me, some fundamental flaw in my character that this moment had exposed. Serafina took a photo of my bleeding ear. When it was done, I stood there with my head buzz cut down to almost nothing. Uneven patches where my shaking hands had done a poor job. Blood smeared on my ear and neck. Dried tear tracks on my face. I looked like someone who had lost a fight with a lawnmower. I looked destroyed. I looked like exactly what they wanted me to look like. The bathroom mirror showed me a stranger. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had been stripped of everything that made them feel human. My father nodded, like I had finally done something right for once in my miserable life. That's the price of forgetting your place, he said, his voice calm and measured. You're the supporting character in this family. Elara, not the star. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. Then they left. All 3 of them, leaving the bathroom door wide open behind them, like they wanted the whole house to see what they had reduced me to. Like they wanted to display their handiwork. I sat down on the cold tile floor and pulled my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible. I didn't cry anymore. I couldn't. The tears had dried up, leaving behind only a hollow, aching emptiness that filled my entire chest. I just sat there, feeling the air conditioning on my bare scalp, feeling more exposed and vulnerable than I had ever felt in my life. Pieces of my hair were scattered around me like evidence of a crime scene, like proof that something terrible had happened here. That night, I lay in my bed in the dark, unable to turn on the lights, unable to look at myself, unable to do anything but stare at the ceiling and try to understand what had just happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices. My mother's contempt, Serafina's mockery, my father's cold dismissal. The words looped in my mind like a broken record, playing over and over until I thought I might lose my sanity. You don't matter. You don't matter. You don't matter. But somewhere in that darkness, in that emptiness, something else began to form. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, not even understanding. Something harder, something sharp, something that would take months to fully understand. But in that moment, it was just a tiny spark of rage, buried deep where they couldn't see it, where they couldn't stomp it out. The next morning, I came downstairs with a scarf wrapped tight around my head, one of my mother's silk scarves that I had taken from her closet without asking. My father sat at the kitchen table reading the Wall Street Journal like it was any other Wednesday, sipping his coffee from his favorite mug, completely at ease. Better, he said without looking up from his newspaper. You finally look appropriate for who you are. Humble. Supportive. The way you should have looked all along. I drove to work in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. I called Marcus from the parking lot and told her I needed to push the presentation back a few days. Personal emergency. Family situation. I couldn't go into details. My voice was shaking, and I was terrified she would ask questions I couldn't answer. But Marcus didn't push for details, didn't demand explanations. She just told me to take the time I needed and that we could reschedule for next week. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after that call, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the corporate office building in front of me, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. A tectonic plate moving, changing the entire landscape of who I was. I realized then, sitting in that parking lot, with my destroyed hair hidden under a scarf and my presentation postponed, that I had spent my entire life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, understanding enough, selfless enough, invisible enough to deserve their love, and it would never be enough. Because the problem wasn't me. It had never been me. The problem was that they needed someone to be less than them, and I had volunteered for the role. The next few weeks were a blur of humiliation and servitude that somehow managed to get worse every single day. My family seemed to realize they had found a new normal, a new baseline for how little I would tolerate, and they pushed that baseline further and further down. The haircutting wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of an escalation, a testing of boundaries to see how much I would endure. They called me constantly, multiple times a day, during work meetings, during lunch, during the few precious moments I had to myself. Run to the store and get sushi for Serafina, the expensive kind from that restaurant 40 minutes away. Drive her to her friend's house across town, and then drive back to pick her up 3 hours later. Transfer money into Mom's account for the bills, even though I knew they made more money than I did. Clean the house because Mom was too stressed from caring for Serafina. Do Serafina's laundry. Make her special meals. Sit with her when she was bored because apparently my time had no value. Every request came wrapped in guilt, with references to my sister's illness, to how selfish I was for even hesitating, for even pausing before saying yes. They weaponized her cancer against me, turned it into a tool to extract whatever they wanted. Serafina wants sushi, my mother said, one afternoon when I told her I had a doctor's appointment for a persistent cough I couldn't shake. You're not dying. She is. You don't get priority. You don't get to put yourself first. Your appointment can wait. She's hungry now. Those words stuck with me, echoed in my skull during the long nights when I couldn't sleep, played on repeat when I was trying to focus on work. I started to internalize them, started to believe that maybe I really didn't deserve to exist unless I was useful to them. Maybe my only value was in what I could provide, what I could sacrifice, what I could give up. But at work, something different was happening. Something that would save my life, though I didn't know it yet. Marcus noticed that I was staying later, burying myself in projects, volunteering for the difficult assignments no one else wanted, the tedious work that required hours of concentration and delivered little glory. I was at my desk by 7 in the morning and rarely left before 9 at night. I ate lunch at my desk. I skipped breaks. I disappeared into spreadsheets and financial models and complex analyses because they were the only place I felt like I had any control. One evening, about a month after the hair incident, she called me into her office. It was past 7, and most of the floor had cleared out. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, and I remember thinking how different the view was from up here, how much bigger the world looked when you had the right vantage point. "Elara," she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of her comfortable leather chairs. "You've been here until 9 o'clock every night this week. Last week too. The week before that. Actually, now that I think about it, you haven't left at a normal hour in over a month. Talk to me." I almost deflected, almost said I was fine, just really focused on my work, really committed to improving my skills. The lies were ready on my tongue, practiced and smooth. But something about the genuine concern in her eyes, the way she looked at me like I was a person and not just a resource, cracked something open in me. Family stuff. I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded slowly, leaning back in her chair, and I could see her mind working, putting pieces together that I hadn't said out loud. "I'm not going to push you to share what you're not ready to share. That's your business, and your privacy matters. But I want you to know that I see you. Your work is exceptional. You notice things other people miss, details that more experienced analysts overlook. You have emotional intelligence that most people spend decades trying to develop, if they ever develop it at all. Whatever is happening outside this office, don't let it convince you that you're not valuable. Because you are. You're more valuable than you know. I cried in Marcus's office that day. Not loud, ugly sobbing, just quiet tears that I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears that had been building behind my eyes for weeks. She handed me tissues from the box on her desk and didn't make it awkward. I didn't try to fix it or minimize it or tell me it would all be okay. She just let me be human for a few minutes. Let me fall apart without judgment. After that conversation, something in me started to change. It was small at first, barely noticeable, like a seed planted in concrete trying to find its way to the light. I began taking online courses in management and financial strategy, studying late into the night in my car, in random parking lots, or at coffee shops. Anywhere but home. I watched lectures on my phone during my lunch breaks. I read business books and leadership articles and case studies about successful negotiators. I started saying no to some of my family's demands. Not all of them. I wasn't that strong yet. But small ones. A grocery run here when I had plans. A last-minute errand there when I was genuinely too exhausted. Each no was tiny. Almost insignificant. But to me they felt revolutionary. Each no was met with outrage. Accusations of selfishness. Reminders of Serafina's suffering. My mother would call me multiple times in a row, leaving increasingly angry voicemails. My father would send texts about family loyalty and obligation. Serafina would post passive-aggressive things on social media that were clearly about me. But I kept some of those boundaries anyway. And the world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. They were angry. But they survived. And more importantly, so did I. Marcus became my mentor. Though I don't think either of us used that word at first. She taught me how to read contracts, how to spot the loopholes and the dangerous clauses that could trap you. She taught me how to negotiate, how to present ideas in ways that made people listen instead of dismiss. She gave me assignments that stretched my capabilities, pushed me outside my comfort zone, and then provided feedback that actually helped me grow instead of just tearing me down to build herself up. She introduced me to her network, brought me to meetings with senior leadership, made sure my name was mentioned in rooms where decisions were made. She advocated for me when I wasn't in the room, and I know this because other people told me. I told me that Marcus thought I was going places. The most important thing she taught me was this: my value didn't come from what I could give other people. It didn't come from how useful I was, how much I sacrificed, how small I made myself. It came from who I was, from what I could build, from the skills I developed and the integrity I maintained, and the unique perspective I brought to problems. For the first time in my life, someone was investing in me without expecting me to sacrifice pieces of myself in return. Someone was building me up without needing me to be less so they could be more. 6 months passed. Fall turned to winter. Winter to spring. My hair grew back in patches, uneven and awkward, but growing. I kept it covered most of the time, still self-conscious, still carrying the shame of that night, even though I knew logically it wasn't my shame to carry. Serafina finished her treatment cycle. The cancer was in remission. Her last PET scan came back clear. It was genuinely wonderful news, and I was genuinely happy for her. I'm not a monster. I never wanted my sister to suffer. I never wished her illness on her. I just wish she had learned some compassion from it. My parents threw a celebration dinner on a Saturday evening in late April. The whole family gathered around the dining room table, a rare moment where everyone was present and smiling. My mother had gone all out, cooking for hours, setting the table with the good china and the crystal glasses that we usually only used for major holidays. The food was elaborate and expensive. Dishes my mother had learned to make from cooking shows. My father had opened a bottle of wine that he said he'd been saving for something special. A bottle that probably cost more than my weekly salary. The dining room glowed with candlelight. Classical music played softly in the background. For a moment, it felt almost like a real family gathering, like we were people who actually cared about each other. For a moment, I let myself hope that maybe things could be different now. Maybe the worst was over. Maybe we could heal. Halfway through the meal, my father raised his glass toward me. The crystal caught the candlelight and sparkled. Everyone's attention turned in my direction, and I felt my stomach drop before he even spoke, some instinct warning me that this moment wasn't what it appeared to be. Helada. he said, and everyone's attention turned in my direction. You should be grateful that you got to be part of Serafina's journey, that you got to participate in your sister's survival. Your sacrifices made this possible. Your willingness to put family first made this moment happen. This is what family means. This is what loyalty looks like. The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me, waiting for me to say something appropriately humble and grateful, waiting for me to thank them for the opportunity to be used. Something snapped inside my chest. It wasn't a loud snap, wasn't dramatic or violent. It was quiet, like a lock disengaging, like a rope finally breaking after months of fraying. I felt it physically, a release of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. Not as an authority figure, not as someone I needed to please or impress or obey, just as a man who had controlled me through fear and manipulation because it served him, because it made him feel powerful, because he could. I didn't sacrifice, I said quietly. My voice was steady, calmer than I expected. I was forced. My mother's fork clattered against her plate, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. What did you just say? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, loud in the hushed room. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I said I was forced. You held me down in that bathroom and made me cut my own hair while you watched and laughed. You took photos. You enjoyed it. You've spent 6 months using Serafina's illness as an excuse to treat me like I don't matter, like I'm just a tool for you to use. And I'm done pretending that any of that was love. I'm done pretending that any of that was normal. My father stood too, his face reddening, his hands clenched into fists on the table. You ungrateful little. No. I cut him off, and the force in my voice surprised even me. My voice was steady now, calm in a way that surprised even me, powerful in a way I had never heard it before. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just finally awake. I'm finally seeing clearly. And I will never let you use me like that again. I will never let you treat me like I'm disposable. I'm done. I walked out of that dining room, grabbed my purse from the hall table where I had left it, and kept walking. Behind me, I could hear their voices raised in anger and shock. My mother screaming my name. My father threatening consequences. Serafina crying about how I was ruining everything. But I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I kept walking toward the door. I opened it. I stepped through. I closed it behind me. That night, I slept in my car in the parking lot of a hotel because I couldn't afford a room, and I couldn't go back to that house. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I reclined my seat as far as it would go and wrapped myself in the emergency blanket I kept in my trunk. And I stared at the ceiling of my car and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Relief. Terrifying. Overwhelming. Beautiful relief. I called in sick to work the next day. Something I never did. And spent hours sitting in a coffee shop with my laptop, researching apartments, calculating how much I would need to move out, planning an exit strategy down to every last detail. I made spreadsheets of expenses and income. I looked at furniture prices and utility costs and commute times. I planned my escape like a military operation. Marcus called me that afternoon. I hadn't told her what happened, hadn't sent any messages or emails, but somehow she knew I needed support. Maybe she heard something in my voice when I called in sick. Maybe she just had good instincts. Maybe she recognized something in me that she had once been herself. Whatever you're going through, she said, and I could hear traffic in the background. He could picture her calling me from her car during her own commute, taking time out of her day to check on me. Just remember that you have options. Always. You always have options. Don't let anyone convince you that you're trapped. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to stay somewhere that's hurting you. I cried then. Really cried. For the first time since that night on the bathroom floor. But these tears felt different. Not helpless. Not defeated. Just releasing something I had carried for too long. Something heavy and toxic that I was finally ready to put down. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. Every single day was a battle. I moved out of my parents' house into a small studio apartment that was barely bigger than their walk-in closet, in a building that had seen better days, with neighbors who played loud music and hallways that smelled like old carpet. But it was mine. The lock was mine. The space was mine. The air was mine to breathe, without feeling like I was taking up too much room. I took Noah with me, our family's elderly golden retriever that no one else bothered to care for anyway. My parents had gotten him when I was in high school, and I had been the one feeding him and walking him and taking him to the vet for years. They didn't even protest when I put him in my car with his bed and his toys. He looked at me with those big brown eyes, like he understood we were starting over together. I cut off all non-essential contact with my family. I didn't answer their calls unless it was absolutely necessary. I didn't respond to their texts. I didn't explain myself or justify my decision or try to make them understand. I just removed myself from their world, drew a line in the sand and stepped across it. They tried everything to pull me back. Guilt trips about family loyalty. Angry voicemails calling me selfish and ungrateful. My mother showed up at my apartment one Saturday morning, pounding on the door and demanding, I come home and stop being dramatic. Stop making a scene. Stop embarrassing the family with this childish tantrum. I stood in my doorway, with my partially grown uneven hair and my cheap furniture from Target visible behind me, my coffee getting cold on my tiny kitchen counter. And I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said no. Just no. One word. Then I closed the door in her face and locked it, and listened to her pound and yell for 10 minutes before she finally left. The silence after that was deafening, but it was also freeing. It was oxygen in lungs that had been suffocating. It was light in a room that had been dark for too long. I threw everything into my career. Every ounce of energy, every moment of focus, every piece of determination I had. I studied constantly, stayed up until 2 a.m, taking online courses and watching lectures and reading case studies. I took on the projects other people avoided because they were too complex or too time-consuming or too politically risky. I learned how to structure deals, how to read people, how to speak up in meetings without apologizing for taking up space, without prefacing every comment with this might be stupid, but, or I'm not sure if this matters, but. Marcus pushed me further than I thought I could go. She gave me a client portfolio that should have gone to someone 2 levels above me. She put me in front of senior executives and made me present my own work instead of letting someone else take credit. She corrected me when I was wrong, praised me when I was right, and always treated me like I was capable of more than I believed. You're capable of so much more than you believe. She told me during one late-night work session when I was convinced I was in over my head, when I was sure I was about to fail spectacularly and publicly. But you have to believe it first. You have to act like you belong here. Because you do. You belong here more than half the people who walk around this office like they own the place. So I tried to believe it. Even when imposter syndrome whispered that I was just fooling everyone. That any moment someone would realize I was a fraud and send me back to where I came from. Even when I missed my family in those strange moments when nostalgia made me forget how much they had hurt me. Made me remember only the good moments and forget the bad. Even when I was tired and lonely and wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, I kept working, kept building, kept proving to myself that I was worth the space I took up in the world. I started going to therapy, which I had never done before, because my family thought therapy was for people who were broken or weak. My therapist, Dr. Sarahjen, was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, and a way of asking questions that made me think about things I had spent years avoiding. She helped me understand that what had happened to me had a name: emotional abuse, financial exploitation, familial scapegoating. She helped me see that I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt, wasn't overreacting for leaving, wasn't selfish for choosing myself. You survived a system designed to keep you small, she told me in one session. And not only did you survive it, you're breaking free from it. That takes incredible strength. Give yourself credit for that. 11 months after I moved out. 11 months of grinding and growing and fighting every day to become someone different. Marcus called me into her office with an expression I couldn't read. My heart sank. I was sure I was about to be let go. Sure that someone had finally realized I didn't belong. Sure that my entire new life was about to crumble. I'm offering you a partnership, she said without preamble, without building up to it, just stating it like a fact. It usually takes people 15 years to get this opportunity. You've done it in under 2. And before you say you're not ready, before you start listing all the reasons why you don't deserve this, let me stop you. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen hundreds of analysts come through this firm. I know talent when I see it. You're the kind of person this industry tries to overlook. The kind of person who doesn't fit the traditional mold. And then everyone always regrets it when you end up somewhere else. I don't want to be one of those people who missed your value. I don't want to be the person who let you slip away. I signed the partnership agreement with hands that shook, but this time from excitement rather than fear, from possibility rather than dread. My salary jumped to a level that exceeded both my parents' incomes combined. I wasn't just climbing anymore. I had leverage. I had power. I had a voice that people actually listened to. I had earned a seat at a table I had once been told I would never reach. I moved into a better apartment, a 2-bedroom in a good neighborhood with actual natural light and hardwood floors and a view of the park. I created a home for myself and Noah, decorated it with things that made me happy. Not things that matched someone else's aesthetic or met someone else's standards. I bought furniture that was comfortable instead of impressive. I hung art that spoke to me, colorful abstract pieces that looked nothing like the bland neutral paintings my mother preferred. I filled my bookshelves with books I actually wanted to read. I bought plants and kept them alive. I existed in a space where I could breathe without feeling like I was taking up too much room. Where I could laugh without wondering if I was too loud. Where I could just be. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving. I felt like I was a person instead of just a function. And then, 18 months after I walked out of that celebration dinner, my phone rang with a message from my mother. Serafina needs you. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Felt my pulse quicken. Felt old fears and old patterns trying to reassert themselves. Trying to pull me back into the person I used to be. But I wasn't that person anymore. 15 minutes later, my parents were in my office building, not in the lobby. Not at the receptionist desk. In my actual office. On my floor. Having somehow talked their way past security by claiming to be my family. My assistant, James, a young guy fresh out of college who I had specifically hired because he reminded me of myself, had tried to stop them, but they had bulldozed past him. I found them waiting in my personal conference room, sitting in my chairs like they belonged there, like they owned the space. My father had that same imperious expression he always wore, like he was surveying his kingdom. My mother was examining the expensive art on my walls with barely concealed envy, touching the frames, calculating their worth. And there, in the corner near the window, was Serafina, looking healthy and vibrant and beautiful, her hair grown back long and thick. Scrolling through her phone like this was all beneath her. Nice place, my mother said, her tone making it clear she thought it was wasted on me. That someone like me didn't deserve an office like this. We need to talk about Serafina's future. I stood in the doorway, not entering fully, maintaining the distance. And that involves me how? Your company just secured a partnership with that new media program, my father said, getting straight to the point. No small talk. No, how have you been? No acknowledgement of the 18 months that had passed. The one everyone's talking about? Serafina wants in. She's perfect for it. You're going to write her a recommendation letter. You're going to put in a good word. You're going to make sure she gets accepted. Not a request. A statement. An assumption that, of course, I would do this. Because family. Because obligation. Because that's what I had always done before. Because I was still their tool to be used. I looked at Serafina. She met my eyes with a challenge. That same expression she had worn while watching me butcher my own hair 18 months ago. Entitled. Dismissive. Sure that I would fold. That I would crumble. That underneath this new exterior, I was still the same scared girl who would do anything to avoid conflict. My mother stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm in a gesture that might have looked affectionate to an outsider, but felt like ownership to me. Felt like she was marking her territory. She deserves this opportunity. After everything she's been through, after her battle with cancer, she deserves to have doors opened for her. You owe her. You owe us. We're family. This is what family does. My father nodded, standing up from his chair and walking toward me, using his height to intimidate me like he had done my entire childhood. Everything comes back home eventually. You can run away and play successful for a while. But you're still our daughter. You still have obligations. You'll put her name at the top of the list. You'll make sure she gets in. And then things can go back to normal between us." I stood there, watching them in my space, in the world I had built for myself brick by brick. And I felt nothing but crystal clear clarity. They hadn't changed. They would never change. They were the same people who had forced me to destroy myself for their convenience. And they truly believed they still had that power over me. They thought 18 months of silence hadn't changed anything fundamental, that I would just snap back into place like a rubber band. "You've made a mistake coming here," I said quietly. My father frowned, his eyebrows drawing together. "Excuse me," I said. "You've made a mistake." I stepped fully into the room now. But I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table, in the power position, and for the first time, I wasn't looking up at them. I was looking at them level. As iguals, as someone who had every right to deny them. "You're asking the wrong person. What are you talking about?" My mother's voice had that edge it always got when she was about to launch into her guilt routine. About to list all the things they had done for me, all the ways I had disappointed them. "We raised you," she started, and I could hear the familiar script beginning. "No," I interrupted her, and the word hung in the air like a slap. "You shaved my head. You made me sit on that bathroom floor covered in my own hair and blood while you took pictures and laughed. You used me like a servant. You made me believe I was worthless unless I was useful to you. You spent 18 months treating me like I didn't matter, like I was just a tool for your convenience. And now you come here, into my office, in my building, in the life I built without you, after 18 months of silence, and you expect me to help you. You expect me to just forget." Serafina finally looked up from her phone, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. "You're being dramatic. It was just hair. It grew back. It wasn't about the hair," I said, looking directly at her. "It was never about the hair. It was about power. It was about making sure I knew my place. It was about control. And I'm done being controlled." My father took a step toward me, but I didn't back up, didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. He was just a man now, not a figure of authority, not someone I needed to fear, not someone who had any power over me unless I gave it to him, just a person who had lost the only leverage he ever had over me, my willingness to accept his treatment. "You think you're better than your sister," he said, his voice rising, his face getting red the way it always did when someone challenged him. "No," I replied calmly. "I just finally understand that I was never less. That's what you never got. You needed me to believe I was worthless so you could use me. But I'm not. I never was. They tried everything then. Every manipulation tactic in their arsenal. My mother launched into a speech about family loyalty and obligation, about how blood was thicker than water, about how they had sacrificed so much for me when I was growing up. My father threatened to tell everyone in their social circle about my selfishness, to ruin my reputation, to make sure everyone knew what kind of daughter I was. Serafina called me names I won't repeat, words that were designed to cut deep and hurt. They used guilt and shame and anger and promises and threats, but none of it worked, because I had learned something crucial in my time away from them. Something that Dr. Chen had helped me understand. Something that Marcus had shown me through her actions. Their opinions of me only had power if I gave them power. And I was done handing over my worth to people who would only use it to make me smaller, to people who needed me to be less, so they could feel like more. "I think it's time for you to leave," I said when their voices finally ran out of steam, when they realized their usual tactics weren't working, that the old Alara who would have crumbled by now was gone. "You'll regret this," my father said, his face purple with rage, his hands clenched into fists. "You'll come crawling back. You'll see how hard it is out there without family. And we won't be waiting." "No," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I don't think I will." They left, finally, with all the drama they had brought with them, with threats and insults and slammed doors. No goodbye. No apology. No acknowledgement of anything they had done wrong. No moment of recognition or understanding, just fury that I had dared to refuse them, that I had dared to say no, that I had dared to choose myself. And I realized, standing in my office after they were gone, feeling the adrenaline slowly drain from my system. That I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need closure in the form of an apology or a moment of recognition where they finally saw me as valuable. I didn't need them to admit they were wrong or to ask for forgiveness. I just needed to know, myself, that I was worth protecting, that I deserved boundaries, that my life belonged to me and only me. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Noah would be waiting for me at home, probably sprawled on the couch, even though he wasn't supposed to be on the furniture. Marcus had scheduled a strategy meeting for tomorrow morning that I was genuinely excited about, where we would discuss expanding into new markets. I had work that challenged me, a home that felt safe, a life that was mine. And that, I realized, that was the best revenge I could ever have. Not destroying them, not making them pay, not exposing them or punishing them or bringing them down to where they had tried to keep me, just living well, living fully, living as someone who refused to be small anymore, living as someone who had found their worth not in spite of them, but because I had finally removed their voice from my internal dialogue. That evening, I called my friend Rebecca, who worked with a nonprofit supporting abuse survivors. She and I had met at a networking event 6 months earlier, and we had bonded over coffee and shared experiences. I had been thinking about this for months, but now felt like the right time. Now felt like the moment when I was finally ready. I want to set up a fund, I told her, my voice steady and sure, for women who need to escape toxic family situations, housing assistance, therapy, job training, legal fees if they need them, whatever they need to build independent lives, whatever I needed when I was starting over. That's a significant commitment, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, both financially and emotionally. Are you sure you're ready for that? I know, I replied, looking around my apartment, at the life I had built, at the person I had become. But someone believed in me when I had nothing to offer in return. Someone invested in me when I was broken. Time to pay that forward. Time to be for someone else what Marcus was for me. 3 months later, the fund was operational. We had helped 7 women leave abusive situations, set them up with temporary housing, connected them with therapists and job training programs. It wasn't about my family anymore. It wasn't even really about me anymore. It was about every person who had ever been told they were worthless, who had ever been forced to make themselves smaller to make someone else comfortable, who had ever wondered if they deserved better and been told they didn't. Told they were selfish for even thinking it. They did. We all did. Every single one of us deserved to be treated with basic human dignity. My parents never contacted me again after that day in my office. I heard through distant relatives that they told everyone I had become too proud, too successful. That money had changed me and made me forget where I came from. Serafina found another connection to get into her media program. And from what I heard through the grapevine, she dropped out after 3 months because it was harder than she expected. They moved on with their lives, and I moved on with mine. And the space between us grew wider and more permanent with each passing day. Do I miss them sometimes? The honest answer is yes. I miss the idea of them, the fantasy of what a family could have been, should have been. I miss the possibility of parents who actually saw me, of a sister who actually cared. But I don't miss the reality. I don't miss the person I had to become to survive in their world. I don't miss walking on eggshells or swallowing my words or making myself small or feeling like I was never good enough no matter what I did. Now, standing in my apartment with Noah asleep at my feet, his gentle snoring filling the quiet space, looking out over a city full of lights and possibilities, looking at the reflection of a woman I actually recognize, I can say with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. The only choice, the choice that saved my life. Because at the end of the day, you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. You can't grow in soil that's poisoned. You can't become who you're meant to be while people are constantly cutting you down. Your worth is not determined by what you can do for other people, especially people who only value your service and not your soul. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And sometimes the most radical act of self-love is simply refusing to participate in your own destruction, refusing to shrink, refusing to apologize for taking up space. So here's my question for you. What would your life look like if you stopped making yourself smaller for people who will never appreciate you? What would you do if you knew your worth wasn't up for debate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and your story matters. Never forget that.